Welcome to the Gourds and Pomegranates podcast, talking common sense for church communications. Here's Hannah and Joe.
We're back continuing our second series of Gourds and Pomegranates, and today Hannah and I are really excited to be joined by a wonderful guest, Benj, Lyon, who is the head of media and communications at Living Rock Church in Leicester. I'm not going to lie, Benj, I've got a picture of a lion on my screen so that I remember how to pronounce your surname correctly.
That's helpful.
But we're really glad to have you with us. Welcome.
Thanks so much. Nice to be with you both.
It's our first guest.
Yes, very first guest on the podcast.
Good. Nothing to compare me to, which is helpful. So.
So, to get us all feeling comfortable before we ask the deep questions, I'm going to ask a few quick-fire questions, Benj, and I need them completely on instinct. What's your favourite chocolate biscuit?
I actually don't really eat biscuits.
We're straight away in with the controversial opinions then.
Apologies, yeah. So maybe I'll say like a cookie.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that definitely counts as a biscuit.
like a chocolate one, or are you going to sort of rebel even further and say like oat and raisin?
White chocolate chip cookie.
That's quite a good one, yeah. No, I'll allow that. Favourite social platform?
I'd say Instagram if I had to choose one. I don't really like any of them, if I'm honest, but maybe we'll talk about that later.
Cool. And do you have a favourite podcast or any regulars that you tune into each week?
Yes, I love podcasts. I'm currently training for the London Marathon, so at the minute I'm mostly listening to running podcasts, which a lot of people might find very boring. But aside from that, there's a couple. I very often listen to Brady Shearer's podcast, whatever that's called these days. And there's another one called Creative Elements, which is very good.
Okay.
Which is just general people out in the world in creative fields being interviewed. So yeah, that's a really good podcast. Very well produced podcast. Much like this one, of course.
I was going to say you're setting the bar high then. I want to dig more into those running podcasts. Are they podcasts that you listen to whilst you're running, about running? That's very meta.
Both.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. I'm trying to, it's my first marathon, so I'm trying to immerse myself in the world of marathon training and everything that goes into that. So yeah, a lot of my commutes I spend listening to podcasts about what you eat and how you should sleep and training and all of that. And then, sometimes I listen to that whilst I run.
Do cookies feature heavily?
Cookies do not feature, actually, but you're probably allowed one or two every now and again.
Yeah, halfway through the marathon or something.
I think that's like the benefit of running, or that's. I mean, I'm not a marathon runner, but I do enjoy short runs. But I feel, well, I've gone for a run. I'm allowed this biscuit. Like I can. It's sort of the fact I've been for a run. I am allowed to not feel guilty about eating a biscuit. So I think if you're doing a marathon, it should be like a whole basket of cookies.
Yeah, I mean, the amazing thing about marathon training is you are actively encouraged to eat lots of carbs, which normally you probably shouldn't like overdo it, but you have to eat way more than you think you should. So that's nice.
Cool. Well, we'll link in the other podcasts for anyone who wants a bit more on church comms or even running. We'll link them in the show notes. Yeah. And then final quickfire, gourd or a pomegranate?
So you're going to have to tell me what a gourd is.
Wow.
I tried to Google this and wasn't any more clued up.
That's fair. I think it's anything kind of related to a pumpkin in that sort of family.
Okay,
so,
fine.
I mean, I kind of see them as being between a pumpkin and a like courgette or something.
Big stem.
Then I would say gourd. If I'm going to put butternut squash in that category, and I love butternut squash.
Yeah, I think that's fair.
Yes.
We'll get a gourd specialist on one day and they can tell us off. But
yeah. Super. Well, thank you for participating in our quickfire questions.
Yeah, there's no prize.
It doesn't necessarily mean anything. We were sort of thought they were some quite fun questions to ask.
So tell us a little bit about your background and how you got to where you are and what you're doing today.
Yeah, sure. So I am based in the Midlands in a town called Market Harborough, which is sort of in between Leicestershire and Northamptonshire. We're sort of an hour from London, an hour from Birmingham, an hour from Cambridge, between 1 and 2 hours from most places in the UK, which is quite nice. I studied in Manchester for university. I did a degree in digital media and communications. I came out of that and went straight into a job for a web agency in Birmingham. I was there for a few years, and then an opportunity came along at our church to come in and head up all things media and comms related. That was back in 2015, and I've been there ever since. So coming up to 8 years this year.
Quite a while.
And yeah, I suppose I've always wanted to find that intersection between my passion and love for design and creativity and all of that with my passion for the church and Jesus, and wanting to help the church, particularly local church, to do that better. So yeah, that's kind of how I ended up there. I've kind of been freelancing ever since uni as well, in my increasingly less spare time. Yeah, I'm one of those people classically who's just always needs something kind of creative to keep their mind creative. So there's always some sort of project going on.
Awesome. And where do you think that your passion for design and particular kind of church communications comes from?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I guess on the one hand, you could say, like, I believe that God has given me a certain passion for that. But then, I look kind of the less spiritual side of things. I look at my family, sort of the people in my family and extended family tend to be quite creative anyway. There's lots of artists and musicians, and my granddad was a footwear designer. My auntie's a very good fine artist, and there's kind of a lot of that in the family. So I'm sure there's a bit of that in the mix. But I kind of just, from memory growing up, it was always those sorts of things which really got me going. And I went through phases of wanting to be an architect, and then a graphic designer, and then a filmmaker, and I kind of a musician. Like, I kind of went through all of the phases. And
that's interesting. I think there's probably a lot of creatives and maybe designers, maybe in particular, I don't know if it's particularly a designer trait, but who can relate to that and have been through lots of those different things and then want to do something that in some way ties them all together, right?
Yeah, 100%. And probably similar to many people in a role like the role that I have, you tend to be the person who also leads worship or plays in the worship team, because there's that sort of musical creativity in you as well. You often hear that, and so it doesn't really surprise me anymore, to be honest. So yeah, I think that's probably the mix of it all. But I suppose in terms of, like, I always had this desire to see the church using creativity, but particularly like in the digital sphere. I suppose growing up throughout the 90s, the noughties, and to now, in a time where technology and media and all of that's really taken off.
Yeah, huge transition.
And it always bothered me that there's the idea that the church might be behind in some of those things, particularly in the way that we present the gospel to those that need to hear it. And we're now in 2023, and the whole world is online, and everything we do is online first. And I think as churches we should be aware of that and willing to be there, if nothing else, to help bring people to a physical connection with the church and with Jesus, obviously. So yeah.
And you say about falling behind, but you see that people in the world, businesses, non-Christian charities are more than happy to spend money, put budget, resources to these things and do them well. And I guess for me, my reflection is, if they're willing to do that to sell, I don't know, toothbrushes, then surely we should be willing to do the same and put our money where our mouth is, because we have a message which is so much more important and valuable.
Yeah, 100%. I think as churches we can learn a lot from the non-church world and what people are doing. But I also think we need to remember that we all know personally the creative God, the God who gives us creativity. And so I believe we should be the first to come up with new ideas and inventions and ways of doing things which other people haven't seen. But yeah, that's what gets me going.
Yeah. So, I mean, you mentioned your role at the Living Rock now, so sort of heading up media communications. Obviously, you've been there not that far off 10 years, so I imagine this has changed over time. But at the moment, at least, what does that role look like? What are your responsibilities? What does it look like day to day?
Yeah, good question. Well, again, probably like a lot of people that work for a church, your role on paper, it doesn't always manifest in what it looks like day to day. There's often other things that come up which you get drawn into. But to sort of give you like a general idea, I suppose, at Living Rock Church, we have myself and somebody else who are both employed full-time in the media and comms team. I'm technically his boss. So part of my week or part of my day is checking in with him and reviewing the stuff that he's working on and, and what that looks like. I'm in meetings with the leadership of the church regularly, just talking through stuff that's coming up, events that are coming up, but also probably more strategically, like the direction for the church to go in the next however long, which is really important. I feel like my role primarily is to use the gifts and talents that I have to best serve the vision and the mission of the church and the leadership of the church. And so practically that means that I need to know what that is from those that are involved. I need to spend time with them. I need to hear what they're thinking about, praying about. So yeah, some of my week is spent doing that. Some of my week I'm get my hands dirty almost and creating graphic designs or updating things on websites or filming for something, so I'm still sort of involved with a lot of the actual physical work, if you could put it that way. But having somebody that works with me, who that's basically everything that he does, it means that I'm freed up to be a little bit more, sort of like, what's the direction that we're going, planning, project management, and that sort of thing. So yeah, that, coupled with a bit of IT security thrown in every now and again, or like lighting for an event, or, there's all sorts of other things that come up as well. But
I was going to say, that's not even including like Easter and Christmas, and when you've got all of those sorts of events going on and you need to be present and capturing all of them.
Yeah, 100%. And yeah, for anybody listening who's in the same position, you'll know that you're executing a great Christmas event, let's say, but even during the event, you're constantly thinking like, right, I should probably film this and photograph this so I can promote the next year's Christmas event.
Yep.
And we should probably be thinking, how do we follow up with all the visitors? And we should be thinking, what's coming up in January that we need to promote now? And, whilst everyone else is just happily enjoying Christmas, Christmas in the church comms world is a really, really busy time, and it can be quite hard to switch off from that and just enjoy Christmas.
I mean, we did an episode just before Christmas about thinking before Christmas about next Christmas, and that there's not a lot of roles in church life where you have to think that far ahead. I suppose church comms is that all-encompassing sort of thing that you can have an endless to-do list, and so you have to prioritize, and we'll come on to that in a second. But just going back into what you were saying about strategy and trying to figure out the direction. So I guess this question will relate partly to your role, but also to the role of the person that you manage. How do you balance your time between the different areas of comms? So you could, if you were inclined towards video, very easily spend your whole week working on one or a few videos, and then not have any time for updating the website or writing content or doing your social media, that sort of thing. How do you try and balance those priorities within the church?
It's a good question. I think this is a challenge, and I think this is increasingly challenging for some reason as time goes on. I feel like there's more and more demand or expectation put on those who are in this kind of a role to do more and more. And we only have a certain number of hours in a day. And I suppose for me, I would try and think about what I spend my time doing could either be to serve the church and the people that are currently in the church, or it could be to serve the people that are not in the church but we'd love to reach.
Yeah, that's a really helpful distinction.
Yeah.
And ideally you want to reach both people. You want to help the church, you also want to reach the lost, but figuring out what percentage you give to each of those groups I think can be quite helpful. And the easy thing is to weigh it way more in the favor of the people that are in the church. That's it. I think that's an easy thing to do because
it's the default position.
It's hard work. It's hard work reaching people that are not there yet because you're trying to figure out what do they want to hear, what's the stories that they want to know. Like that takes quite a lot. Whereas the people that are in the church, you know them, you can quite happily say, great, we're going to do this 4-week course on baptism, let's say. We know what baptism is, so it's quite easy to plan that, and that's very easy. So I'm not saying that we don't do one or the other. I think we have to help both people, but figuring out that weight of who gets the priority at different times as well. Christmas, let's go back to Christmas. I would suggest that you would probably weight it 85-90% towards those that are not in the church because of the time of year. So your priorities might change throughout the year. And then I think when you know who you're reaching, that's like a big part of the battle. And then you can kind of say, right, so let's take Christmas. We're gonna try and reach people that we haven't met yet. And then you can start thinking, well, what do they need to know about us as a church? What do they need to know about Christmas, about Jesus? And what are the most effective ways that we can communicate with them through this season?
That isn't just an invite to the event.
Yeah, exactly. A lot of that probably will be through social media. Let's be honest, most people, social media is the thing that they use more than anything. Following that, it's probably going to be your website, because for most people, before they ever come and check you out in person, they want to check you out online. So but if you think about your church, people that are in your church, they probably rarely look at your church website because they don't need to, because they're in the church. So that's kind of like where your focus might shift for a season on those things, and then it might shift away for other seasons. I think you've got to be well organized. You've got to be honest with how long things take. And this is something I've had to learn over many, many years, that, you know, with all the will in the world, something that you think might take an hour, in reality probably takes 2. So being good at estimating how long things are going to take you, and then you can pretty quickly work out whether your week is full or not. And if it's full, then having some hard conversations with people and saying, you know, you want me to do this flyer for you for your event. If I do that, I can't do something else because I just don't have the time. So which is the priority? And that's either something that we feel we can decide ourselves, or we need somebody who's our line manager or one of the leaders of the church to come to us and say, let's do this thing, let's leave this thing. And I think that's just those things of learning how to practically manage your time and your projects, I think would be good things for many of us to learn, so that we don't get burnt out and overwhelmed with the amount of stuff that's being asked of us. We noticed that the moment we employed a second person to work in the team here, the work more than doubled.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, there's an extra person, so twice as much. It was way more than twice as much that was being asked. And just because you have somebody that takes on a role for some reason, everybody else thinks, great, we can do all this other stuff, and it almost always equates to more than what is actually possible. So we still just need to just make good decisions about what we prioritize, who we're trying to reach, being honest about how long things are going to take us, and again, coming back to knowing the strategy, knowing the vision for the year or for the 6 months. Where's the church going? Who are we trying to reaching for this 6 months? If the strategy for November, December is try and reach those who are not saved, then I already know that the knitting group that meets on a Thursday is less priority than making a film that's going to reach people at Christmas. And so that then it's an easy decision. I say to the knitting group, look, I love what you're doing, but let's come back to it in January.
But doing it sensitively, so as not to alienate them at the same time, right? Doing it in love.
And they're usually fine with that.
And also, I think that's where it's really important for everyone in the church to know not the ins and outs of a strategy, but to know we're not just doing posters for the sake of it, but actually there is a reason and an intention behind it, so that when you come to them saying, actually, do you know what, we haven't got the capacity to do that right now, we're focusing on XYZ, they understand it, because actually there's a lot more transparency within the church. I've been in churches where that wasn't so much communicated, and then everyone felt very defensive because suddenly their project, their ministry, their thing that's happening is being threatened.
Yeah, 100%.
It's not. It's just, we've just got to sort of rejiggle kind of the priorities around.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry, go on.
Sorry. I was going to say that kind of actually takes us on to the next question of, if it, not every church can have one or more paid staff dedicated specifically to comms. For a lot of them, it's volunteers or someone doing one job that encompasses kind of many different elements, and comms is just one part. So what should the priorities be? So if someone is just starting out with proactively running their comms at their church, where should they be focusing? Sort of where's the best place to spend their efforts?
This is a really good question, because I think there's probably lots of people that are in this boat. I'm really aware that the situation that I'm in, having 2 people employed full time to do media and comms for a church that is 500 to 600 people, that's quite rare, and I'm really aware of that, and we're very blessed to be in that position, to have people that see the value and are willing, for lack of a better phrase, willing to put their money where their mouth is type thing. Do you know what I mean? So for the people that are not in that situation, if you're listening to this, you're probably in a position of like, the value, you have the desire to do something, and often, and I hear this question a lot, often the question is like, how do we get the leaders on board? And it's almost a little bit like you've seen it, but you're trying really hard to get everyone else to get onto the same page as you are. So that's a challenge. Maybe we'll come back to that specifically in a minute. But yeah, what should the priorities be? I would first off be thinking about your church's website. This is getting really practical now.
Nice, useful stuff.
I would think about your church's website. Yeah. Your church's website, as I said earlier, most people, before they ever come and visit you in person, they will try and find you online. So the first thing is, can they find you? And your presence in Google, because pretty much everybody's going to be using Google, will be impacted by your website, whether you've got fairly active social media presence, perhaps, how you set up your Google profile. And all of these things are free to do. That's really good. So there's no cost involved, well, aside from having a website hosted, etc. But your website is something that you control. You decide what goes on there. You change it when you want to change it, rather than social media being dictated by the big wigs at Facebook and Instagram or whatever. And that's really good. So I would say focus on your website, focus on making sure that people can find you, get into Google Business or whatever it's called, and set yourself up as a business You're not a business, obviously, but set yourself up so people know where you meet. They know how to find you. People can start reviewing you. We have lots of people that review us on Google, and whether it's a good review or a bad review, all of the reviews help people to know that this church is a church that people go to, and it can be trusted in that sense. Following that, social media. I said right at the start, I don't really like social media, but I'm so aware that we have to use it. And this is my biggest conflict in life, is I know that we have to use it as churches and we have to use it effectively, but I personally lack that desire. So that's a constant battle for me. But anyway, we should use social media because the world is using social media.
Yeah.
But also, I think you're not the only one who's having that desire. I can certainly relate to it to an extent, but there will be people out there as well who feel exactly the same as you and aren't using social media, and we shouldn't therefore just forget about them.
No, definitely not. But it's free to do. Everything I'm probably going to suggest now, it's free.
Yeah.
So it should be really easy for us all to start doing it. You don't need to jump in with paid ads or anything like that. Just start posting stuff.
Yeah.
Think about a healthy balance of informational posts. I'm taking this phrase from Brady Shearer here. Informational versus inspirational. What percentage of what you're posting is there to inspire people, and what percentage is there to inform people about what you're doing? And we want to inspire more than we inform, but the easy thing is to inform more than we inspire. The easy thing is like, hey, we've got this event coming up, because events are kind of easy to help tell people about. So get some stuff posted on social media. Get yourself a free Canva Pro account. Canva, as of the 15th of March 2023, you can do everything in there that you need to do to create graphics, edit photos. You can do it all in Canva, pretty much.
I love Canva.
And it's free. Exactly. Everybody loves Canva. It's amazing because you can have one design that's worked on by multiple people in your team, which is great as well. So let's say there's so-and-so in the other office needs to edit the event time. They can find the document and edit it in Canva, and you don't have to share anything, etc., etc. So Canva's great. Use Canva to make stuff. Use Canva templates. If you're struggling with a bit of creative ideas, just search for a nice template in Canva and edit the content and save it. It can be as simple as that, and it can take 5 minutes. And then probably the two other things I would encourage you to do. So we've talked about website, we've talked about just your presence in Google, people can find you. We've talked about social media and posting stuff on social media. Coupled with that, I would make sure that you start to build up a collection of photos that you can use of your church. Now, the church is the people. We have church buildings, and the church meets at the church building. At least that's how I theologically understand it. The word church in the Bible means the people. So I really, really believe that we should be presenting the church to the world as the people. And that's really good because people love to see other people online. When you're on social media, posts that include people's faces, and particularly if they're smiling, they get way more engagement than posts that don't include people or people that are sad. So we should start taking photos of real people from our churches that look happy, because the people that you're trying to reach, they want to see a community that they could see themselves in. So they need to see that there's people that look like them. We're in the UK. We're not American with amazing white teethy smiles like stock images. Stop using stock images. So the practical way to do this is, if you have an iPhone, which most people do have an iPhone, open up the camera app, stick it in portrait mode, and take a photo of a person. And if you did that with just 5 people every week, after a month or 2, you'd have loads of images of people that you could use to post on social media, to put onto the website. And we can start presenting your church as, hey, look, this is all real people that live near me. that look like me, probably. And actually, I could imagine myself being friends with that guy, or I can imagine hearing that lady talk about such and such. I think people can smell a stock photo a mile away. It's so obvious. So yeah, we can do that. A little tip on the portrait mode in iPhones. The default setting for portrait mode is like a massively blurred background. You can change the aperture, the f number. I think it starts at like 1.8 or 2.8 or something. Tap the little F in the top right corner and just slide your finger a little bit so that it's more like 4 or 5 or something like that. And it'll give you a much more natural...
I didn't know you could do this.
Yeah.
The beautiful thing about it is you can do it after you've taken the photo as well.
Oh, there you go. Do it after. But it will make it much more natural looking and much less like an iPhone in portrait mode. So do that. Take a mixture of portrait versus landscape. Social media posts are great in portrait pretty much, as in like vertical. But very often when it comes to like websites and stuff, landscape tends to be easier to work with. So take a mixture. Once you've taken photos of people, take photos of your church building so that when people say, how do I find you? They can see the church building. Take photos of people in a house, take photos of people on a walk, take photos of people eating, take photos of people singing, and, you know, try and capture a variety of what church life looks like. Because we don't, I mean, most churches, it's not just a Sunday meeting, but being a part of a church means much more than that. It means having people around you that you can do life with. So what does that look like? And let's try and show people that. And again, this is free to do. The last thing, sorry, I've got a lot here, I suppose.
You don't need to apologize. This is gold. I'm hoping that our listener is sitting there like scribbling notes away to go away and do all of this.
Yeah.
The last thing I would say, and again, this is like things that I would do if I was to start again today, probably. The last thing I would do is to figure out some really good processes for the way that you work, the way that you handle incoming requests of your work. So if somebody says, hey, we've got an event, we need to do XYZ, start to think about how you're going to manage that. Think of it like project management. How are you going to manage projects? How are you going to make sure that everything that needs to get done does get done? Nothing gets missed. Things get done on time. If there's more of you in the team, how are you going to delegate work and make sure people know what they're supposed to do? Have a think about all of that. There's loads of project management tools available. There's a few which the majority of people tend to use. Try them out. Find one that works for you. Most of them you can use for free to some extent. We personally use Trello and have used it for since I've been there. Trello's free.
I'm not sure if you've noticed this, whether you can see on camera. I'm actually wearing my Trello t-shirt today, which was
wow.
an entire coincidence.
Dedicated fan.
But we've talked a bit about Trello before because it's such a great tool.
Yeah.
It is. It's a great tool, and what started as just moving cards across lists on a screen is way more than that now. You can do a lot with it. You can do some really clever things that are automated with Trello and other apps as well. If you use Slack as a communications platform within your team, you can connect the two together and you can tell Slack to notify you when certain things happen and vice versa. And you can do lots of clever things. But yeah, I just generally speaking, I would try and plan out how you as an individual or as a team are going to manage the growing level of work that comes your way. What's the stuff that you do every week that has the same process every week? Things like, do you upload a podcast? If so, you probably go through the same process every single Monday morning, let's say. So one Monday morning, you should just record the process like a checklist and then set it in Trello as a repeating card that pops up every Monday. And whoever's doing it can open the card and just tick, 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 tick. And you're not having to think about, have I remembered to post it to YouTube, or have I put it on the podcast hosting platform, and have I written a blurb and all of that? Make life easier for yourself and just start following checklists. Set them to do things automatically so you don't have to remember. And that will free up your headspace to be able to think about some of the other stuff that you're trying to do as well.
Yeah. And I think in that case, it also is safeguarding. It's probably not the right word, but safeguarding for if there are problems. And I think that's one of the things the pandemic's shown us, that unfortunately, unexpected things can happen and people can get ill very quickly, and, you know, really tragic things can happen. And I think that that's my worst fear that I'm learning working for myself, is that everything is tied up in my head of how I do it, because I don't need to explain it to anyone. But actually, if there are people coming to join me in my work, or if I'm working with other people, I don't have all of those processes written down. So I think actually that's a really good idea to sort of have it in Trello, even if it is just for me, but then I'm not having to think about it. But then if your team's expanding, or if you're having volunteers join in, having the process listed out, that's just one thing less that you need to think about in explaining it.
Yeah, for sure.
Or God forbid anything should happen to you, then you're not there. That actually people aren't sort of stressing about, oh, we don't know how to actually upload the podcast. And that's not really something that we want to be talking to you whilst you're in hospital or something.
Yeah, 100%. One thing I've learned, and this was a big thing when I was sort of in agency world, a huge thing is that you should never be working on anything which only you can access. Always make sure that other people have got a way of getting what you're working on.
Yeah.
So getting into the habit of, at the end of the day, save your file up to somewhere in the cloud, so that if tomorrow you're unwell and someone needs to pick it up, they can easily get it.
Yeah.
Those are some really helpful tips. You saved me. I've written down a quote from when we chatted before to talk about doing the podcast today, and you said about, what does the world need to see? The church is people, not just events, and people like me that they can relate to. So I don't need to bring that up anymore, because you've already covered that, which is really good. I think just one sort of question that comes out of that is, if you're doing these things, specifically taking the photos, showing or capturing what church life looks like, how might you translate that into a quick win social media campaign? What might that actually look like in terms of posting that as content?
Well, I would suggest planning out your social media strategy at some point. And that could be as simple as create a spreadsheet with days of the week or weeks in the month or whatever, and just thinking about, what are we trying to communicate on social media? If you're going to do a campaign about something, let's say it's Christmas again, Christmas is coming, and you want to do like an advent calendar of good news or something. So you're like, I want to find 24 little testimonies, stories of good news. Just knowing that that's the plan will then inform me of what photographs I might think about taking. So if we're going to do 24 posts, feel free to steal this idea, anybody, by the way. I'm just, random idea. But if you want to do 24 like short stories of people at your church where Jesus has changed their life in some way, big or small, then write down 24 names, approach those 24 people and say, are you up for it? Do you mind me taking your photo? And then if it was me, probably what I would do is I would photograph each of those people twice, one looking really, really happy and one looking a little bit more maybe sad or just indifferent, and show the difference of what that person looks like before and after this good thing has happened, so that visually the person who's looking at the post can see the difference, and then they can read about the story. And yeah, again, doing that, photographing somebody should take like 60 seconds, probably 2 photos, give them a few goes each time, and then spend 5 minutes with them just noting down the key information about their story. That's probably, I don't know, let's say it's like a couple of hours worth of work, which you could do in September and schedule it in way before December's even started. And it's one less thing to worry about when you get there, which sounds great in reality. And sorry, in theory, but the reality of it, for me at least, is I'm never that prepared. I'm always very good at saying good ideas for things, but the reality is sometimes different.
Yeah.
But
no, that's really helpful.
So yeah, so I think in answer to your question, how do we approach like the campaign side of things? I think about what the campaign is first, plan it on paper, and then that can inform you of what assets you need to start getting.
Yeah.
And you might have some already, but you might need to go and get new things.
Yeah.
But at least you know what the plan's going to be.
Yeah. No, that's really helpful. And I think getting it that right way round as well, so that you're going in prepared, knowing what you need to capture.
Yeah.
It reminds me, we did a campaign a few years back whilst we were just about to knock down the church building. And so rather than have to worry about putting sort of graphics on photos, anything like that, we took a whiteboard and some sheets of paper and that sort of thing, got people to write down just a brief memory that building held for them, hold it up, have a portrait outside the church. And that obviously creates loads of content that you can then use going forward as well. So those sorts of ideas are gold. And yeah, we'd love to see them, love to see people stealing them and using them.
Yeah.
So this is a bit of a bigger, definitely a less practical question, but what do you think is the primary challenge for UK churches these days regarding their communications? In 3 words.
In 3 words. Well, I suppose I probably would take a little bit of what we said, and I would say one challenge is presenting a real version of ourselves, of our churches. I think many of us have aspirations of what we would like to be like, and rightly or wrongly, we take those aspirations from other often very big churches that we look to and we're like, oh, how amazing is Hillsong or whatever, and
like church imposter syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. They do things like this, so we should do things like that. And there's nothing wrong with taking inspiration, but it must never be at the cost of presenting who we really are. If you're a church out in the countryside of mostly middle-aged to older people, you don't want to only ever be showing pictures of the 2 young people in your church, because that's not a good representation of what your church is like. And therefore, if somebody comes to visit and they're young and they only find 2 other people, they're going to be like, hang on a minute, I thought something else was going on here. And that's a bad representation of the church. So I think challenge number 1 is being real and balancing that with taking inspiration from others that we look at. I think challenge number 2 is, in a post-pandemic world, learning how to take all of the good things that we learned in COVID, all of the good ways of using digital and all of that, and continuing to use those good things, but using it in a way that helps to facilitate physical relationship and physically being together. Personally, my view is that being together physically is pretty much always better than being together digitally, if you can make that happen. There's some situations where it's quite handy to do something on Zoom. Let's say it's like a 6 a.m. prayer meeting that's half an hour across the town. You know, to do that on Zoom is quite handy, because get up 5 minutes before and sit there in your pajamas. But I think there's a danger that we neglect physically being together post-pandemic. And I think we need to be careful of that. However, there's a lot of good things that we learned that we should still be doing. And particularly we can use that so that we have this kind of beautiful digital and physicalness together. And that's probably another conversation, another big conversation of what that looks like. So I think there's that. And then the last thing I would probably touch on again is that balance of, am I reaching people outside of the church or reaching people in the church, and making sure that we always have a healthy balance, not neglecting either. And very often the default is to focus on people in the church. But I believe that what we do in terms of comms and everything like that, it should be used for the gospel. It should be used to reach people, because that's the mission of every single church that ever existed. So yeah, it's not neglecting either, having a good balance. That was more than 3 words.
Brilliant.
I apologize.
3 points. That's fine. We're always up for having things sort of talked a bit more in detail, because I think it's really hard to summarize it just in sort of actually just 3 words, because everything's so.
For the next question, I'd like you to use 4 words.
Yeah, and literally only 4 words. So anyway, our last proper question. So what excites you about the future of church comms? Both kind of short term, anything exciting that you're doing or that you're seeing sort of happening at the moment, but also long term. Yeah, what excites you?
Good question.
Yeah, I'm excited that, again, post-pandemic, so many churches have learned to do things that they never would have done before. I think that's awesome. And so I'm excited that there's opportunity for things to continue, and for many people to be reaching people online in ways that they've never done before. I think it's amazing. So I think that's really exciting. I'm excited that tech and cameras and computers and like all of the things that we use most days is becoming cheaper and more accessible and more powerful.
Yeah.
And the barrier for the majority of churches to start getting stuff going, that barrier is getting lower and lower and lower. So I think that's really cool as well. It means that it's not just the likes of Hillsong that can produce a really cool video anymore. You know, we can all do it. And I think the only thing that really limits us is the ideas that we have and knowing how to execute those ideas. But we live in an age where you can basically learn anything on YouTube.
Yeah.
So, you know, the barrier really is very low now. So I think that's really cool. And I'm excited that it's easy and it's hard to reach people online. It's easy because you can put anything out there for free and the message is out. The hard thing is getting people to look at it or to listen and to engage with it. And again, that's probably another conversation. But yeah, I'm genuinely excited because I think we live in a time, 2023, where pretty much every single church is capable, if they want to, of making a lot of content for free that could reach a lot of people. And if you compare that to 20 years ago, or, you know, definitely back to Bible times when you got Paul trekking all around the world to try and preach the gospel, it's vastly different. One other thing, I didn't write this down in my notes, but somebody was sharing this on Sunday in our church. They said in the time of Paul in the Bible, the number of people that every Christian needed to reach for the whole world to hear the gospel was something like 100,000 per person. So for however many Christians there were, each one had to reach 100,000. In 2023, when there's 8 billion people on the planet, every Christian would only need to reach 3 people.
Wow.
For the whole world to have heard the gospel. And when I heard that, I thought, what a time we live in. How amazing that there's so many that would profess to be Christians.
Yeah.
And whatever that looks like, it doesn't really matter. The principle, though, is that we're so close to everybody hearing the gospel. And we get to play a part in that, and we get to use the gifts and the talents that God's given us to do that. And I just think that's the biggest privilege. And it's really exciting.
Amen. Definitely. That's all been really helpful.
So helpful.
Benj, we obviously first met via the Church Comms Collective group on Facebook. Listeners can watch this space to find out more about that in an upcoming episode. We're excited to tell you more about that. But I came across you through something that you've put together as a list of resources for churches, right? So can you tell me a little bit more about the list and how someone might go about finding that?
Yeah, sure. As I said at the beginning, I generally always have some kind of project that I'm working on. And I've done a few things over the years, specifically to just try and help churches in ways that I could think of. Many years ago, I set up a bit of like a church directory type website called Church List, which people are welcome to find and use. You can put your church on there for free, and just another way of increasing the chance that somebody may find you online. I've run a conference for church comms people a couple of times and may do another one at some point. That was called Create Conference. Again, just for people to get together and help each other, not to just sit and listen to somebody telling me all the things that I'm not doing, but to help each other, particularly the churches that have lower budgets or less people. How can they learn more stuff practically? So, and then the most recent thing that I've done, which you've just referred to, Joe, is something called the Church Comms Handbook, which I put together last year. And it's built in Notion. For those that don't know, Notion is a bit like a project management tool / make whatever you want tool. It can do a lot. It's quite powerful. But essentially, it's like a clonable collection of pages that are all designed to help you in your church comms job. So there's things like there's a social media calendar there, so you can plan out your social media posts. There's a project management tracker in there, so you can track projects. There's to-do lists, there's documents, inspiration gallery board things, finance, budget trackers, habit trackers. There's a lot of things in there which all may be helpful or some may be helpful. Also in there is something I think I called it the toolbox or something like that, which is like a database full of apps, websites, tools that you may find useful in your church comms job. They're all categorized by what they're useful for, like design or web or social media, whatever. It tells you which ones are free, which ones are paid for, which ones have a charity discount. And you can filter it and search through the whole thing to find what you're looking for. So that's in there as well. And I put it all together so that if anybody wanted to use it, they could use it. It's I think it's like 49 quid for everything, just a one-time fee. But the social media planner is completely free. So if you just wanted to grab the social media calendar, you can do that. And it's as simple as clicking the duplicate button and it will pop it in your own Notion account, and then you can customize it however you want. You can use it with your team or just on your own. And it's just the aim is for it to be useful. If it's useful, then that's great. If you already use something else, then that's fine as well. I'm not trying to make loads of money off it or anything like that. I just want to give churches things that are going to help them in what they do every day.
As much as we like the word free, like we're all about, if something is worth spending the money on it and you're getting the value for it, then you should be doing that. And hopefully that doesn't have to be your own money as a volunteer. Hopefully that's something that your leaders can get on board with and do that.
Yeah, I deliberately priced it at £49, thinking I would like to think that if it's useful, the majority of churches would be okay with spending 49 quid on a tool that's going to help somebody in what they do every single day.
Yeah, definitely.
Benj, it's been so great to chat with you. And I mean, I found loads of value from that, and I'm going to have to re-listen to this. There's been some amazingly insightful thoughts and reflections. We will put all the links in the episode description so that people can find you. But we're just so grateful, and thank you so much for being with us today and chatting.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Ben. That was really great. Really great to hear from Benj today. Some great tips, some really fascinating insights. Obviously, talking about his role and being strategic but still hands-on. I really like that idea of working towards this bigger goal, that's serving the vision of the church and the leadership, not just blindly aiming your comms or going rogue.
Yeah, definitely. And I really liked when he said about the shift in balance and priorities at different times of the year. And I think that's really important to remember. There is this sort of the seasons that go within the sort of church calendars, things like Christmas, balance shifts between the sort of platforms and the audience at the different times of years. We need to be, as the comms people, we need to be flexible for that. And as congregations and the church family, we need to be flexible around that.
Yeah, for sure.
And I also really liked how he said sort of figuring out the processes for how you work, even if it's just for you. And I found that really valuable because I do work on my own. I don't have a team, but still having those processes really help. Either way, it's overwhelming as the workload often grows to match the workers. So for repeated tasks, uploading things, etc., remember to note it down. That's really valuable. How he said that, and I kind of thought, well, that's really obvious, but actually I need to be doing that. And removes that kind of thought fatigue of having to think about it. And then as well, as team grows, it's easier to delegate, whether that's employed staff or volunteers, and you don't miss steps then.
Yeah, that's really helpful.
Yeah.
And I think that social campaign idea as well, those tips on putting together that campaign with people's stories and pictures. We'd definitely love to hear from you if you put that into practice. And the encouragement as well to get that content scheduled ahead of time, to get it scheduled in and reduce your stress around it, which, as it happens, is something that we're going to go over in detail in our very next episode. So come back to Gourds and Pomegranates next week and we can talk about creating a social media schedule.
Yay!